Hey guys, Joseph here. Now, in this video, I'm actually going to do something which I don't think has been done before. Now, if you haven't seen recently, I've been doing a lot of videos on Enlisted's weapons. In fact, I pretty much built my channel, literally. My first ever video was me literally talking shit about the Ross rifle. But in this video, I'm actually going to be looking at pretty much every weapon in the game. There's going to be a few exceptions. I'm not going to include pistols. I'm not going to include the Flamethrowers. I'm not going to include the anti-tank weapons or mortars. But I'm looking at every weapon in Normandy other than them, as well as gold orders. I'm not going to include gold orders either. And basically just critique them from worst to, basically say from worst to best. Now, there's going to be 42 different weapons on this list. Like, 42 different weapons out of all of this. You know, out of all of these, again, and this is not including gold orders, pistols, or the team weapons. God, if I'd have done that, it would have been in at least in the 60s, probably. It would probably been in the low 60s, high 50s. Yeah, this is going to be a long one. So yeah, grab some popcorn, and I'm going to start. I'm going to be putting up a ranking first. So it's going to start off by, I'm going to say what the weapon is, show a picture of the weapon, and then I will pretty much just say, then I'll start, you know, critiquing the weapon or praising it. Basically, yeah, that's how it's going to be. I'm also going to put like a ranking out of 10 on the screen during the start. Basically, it's going to be split into, well, basically, if I think, A, how effective it is, and basically how worth it is for the cost. So that's how I'm basically going to rank them. So, for example, some of these aren't bad, like they're not terrible, they're usable, they're actually pretty good in combat, but the cost they don't justify the cost. Yeah, so with that being said, let's go on to the worst weapon and work our way down to the best. Number 42. The Kar98K with the AT rifle grenades. Yeah, act like you didn't see this coming. This is the latest unlock for the Axis for foot soldiers in Normandy, and it immediately came in as the worst. To put it bluntly, this thing is not worth grinding for. It should be like the main reasons for it being at last place. Now you might be thinking, but there's actual weapons which are unusable. Why is this at last place, JDosser? Well, the reason it's at last place, let's just say the cost. First off, it's 3 silver orders. 3 silver orders for basically something you've already got earlier in the campaign for 2 silver orders. So already it's bad value, which is going to be a contender across the list. You'll see a little bit later as well for a few other weapons. Also, the rifle grenades aren't even that good. Like, they are actually worse than the Sturm pistol for taking out tanks. They're worse than anything for taking out tanks. They're the worst. And also, when you don't have it, it's just a Kar98K again. Like, I know there's the M1 Garand as well has this, but when you get rid of the rifle grenades, it's the M1 Garand, and the Garand is actually a pretty good, solid rifle, you know. Whereas this, yeah, the Kar98K is good and solid, but you've got a version of this which has almost the exact same capabilities, which is a lot earlier and cheaper, and, more to the point, it's a free. You literally get the freebie version at the start of the game. It's like, why? Other than that, like, why is this needed? Which is why it's getting getting the worst spot over legitimately terrible weapons. Well, it is a legitimately terrible weapon, but it's getting the worst spot because I don't get it. Anyways, let's move on to the next weapon, which is number 41. Number 41. The Winchester Model 1912. Act like you didn't see this one coming. See, the fact is, I don't like shotguns in this game, okay? They did a nerf of shotguns. The Winchester is probably still the best shotgun in the game, but man, this thing is awful still. Put it bluntly, there is no reason you should be picking this even over the grease gun. And that's saying something. I'm saying that the grease gun is better than this. It's got a slow rate of fire. It's got really bad recoil. And it's barely controllable. And it has low damage. Like, I've shot this thing at point blank range on a guy who's just gotten up and only gotten white hit markers. To put it bluntly, this thing does not do any damage. It's really bad, and there's no reason to pick this over an SMG. And I've got the unfortunate of having a maxed out version of this from a bronze box. Yeah, I actually have been unfortunate to be cursed with this thing. Anyways, it can only go uphill from here, so let's go on to number 40. Number 40. The Breda Model 30. I'm actually genuinely surprised this is this high. Generally, the fact is, it shows the suckitude of what came before it. That this thing is only the third worst weapon. Jesus Christ. Like, look at this thing. First off, it's fug ugly. Look at that. Look how, this is just ugly. The reload time is a pile of arse. The reload mechanism is a pile of arse. It sucks in everything. It's generally unusable. I remember when I made my bad weapons on this, I had nothing good to say about it. That's a damning thing when I legitimately try to defend every weapon and say, yeah, it can be used in this situation, it can be used in this situation. I had nothing but negativity to say about this thing, which isn't a good thing with anything. Even when I was talking about the Winchester, I at least had some decent things to say about it. And the worst thing is, this is only number 3. Like, there's 2 weapons, I think, and even one in the Axis campaign, that are worse than this thing. At least, thankfully, you don't have to put up with it for too long. But the fact is, you still have to pull up with it for about 8 levels until you get the MG34, which, by the way, could not come any sooner. Anyways, let's move on to number 39. Number 39. The Springfield M1903A4. Another easy contender for the worst pile. I think this thing just slightly edges over the others, because at least this thing is usable. And it's usable in its intended role. The problem with this, same reason for the Kar 98K, it's got a better alternative with the A1, which, the only real thing upside is that this has a slightly better rate of fire, but it's just still bad. This thing should actually be maybe the level. This should either be the level 1 upgrade, the level 1, or it should even be in the game. Or the A1 shouldn't even be in the game, and this should be replaced with, say, the Lee Enfield. I'm just using that as an example. It's a really bad rifle, does not justify the 2 silver orders cost. The A1 at least kind of justifies the 2 silver orders cost with the scope. But this thing, you're just paying extra for a rifle that's slightly better. Like if it was 1 silver order, maybe it'll be a lot higher, but at the moment, no. Comes in as the 4th worst weapon in the game. And believe me, it can only get better from here. Number 38. The M3 Grease Gun. I think one of the most well-known things is how much I hate the Grease Gun. This thing is just awful. It's a really bad SMG. It's supposed to be the replacement for the Thompson. But in Enlisted, the Thompson outclasses it in every capability. It has a piss poor rate of fire. The only thing it has is that it's got good manageable recoil, but the piss poor rate of fire, and the fact that it's really just outclassed by every single SMG in pretty much the entire game. Like, the only SMG I think which is actively worse than this thing is the MP308, and when the only redeeming thing is that you're better than the MP308, you know you're bad. It's a bad weapon. Just awful weapon. and just one of the worst weapons in the game. Yeah, and it comes in easily as the 5th worst. Number 37. The Mannlicher M1895. We are now getting into the reskin bolt actions. The Mannlicher's only real main external quality is that it has a bitch of horizontal recoil. As in, it will literally kick you to the left every time you fire the damn thing. It's really just a, it's a bolt action, almost identical to the car. The only exception is it has slightly worse hit power than the car, and it doesn't have a bayonet. As a result, it easily, and given that the car is free and this is a silver order, really not worth grabbing. You should probably, if you're new to the game, you should keep the one that you've got and never use it when you unlock something better. Seriously, this thing it's not even that good. It's not even fun to use, and the sights are a bit awkward, if I remember correctly. Number 36. The Ross Rifle Mark III. The fact that this thing was hated in real life kind of shows. This thing does not suit well for war. The only real upside it has over the Mannlicher is that it's got slightly better damage and it has slightly better scope. Other than that, it's pretty much the exact same rifle, and same reasons apply to it that apply to the Mannlicher. In fact, I actually made my first ever video which was just shitting on the Ross rifle. Yeah, I generally do not like this weapon, and it easily comes in as one of the worst. Number 35. The FNAB. It's shit. It is just awful. Like, people defend this thing saying, oh, it's really good at long range. Oh, it's really good. It's got a good magazine, or it has low recoil. Do you know what also is good? Has a good magazine, has low recoil, and is good at range? The MP40. Do you know what's also good as well with that? The MP34, the MP35, the Beretta, the Z. Literally, you name an Axis assault weapon other than the Beretta M1918, and this thing is just outclassed by all of them in everything. It's got a slow rate of fire. It doesn't do much damage. It's literally like you're firing marshmallows at the bloody targets. And the only reason this is better than the grease gun is because this has 10 more bullets in the magazine. So, really, you're firing a few extra bullets off before needing to reload. The fact is as well, this has a semi-auto fire, and it's triggered on default on auto. I don't know which one's actually quicker firing, semi-auto or full auto. I generally do not know. It's a bad SMG and one of the worst in the game, and it comes in the top 10 for worst weapons. Number 34. The M3A1 Grease Gun. Essentially identical to the Grease Gun. The only thing it has is that it has a better rate of fire. That's literally all it has. It has a better rate of fire, and that's it. Now, normally some weapons, they're not as good if they have a better rate of fire. Some can be uncontrollable. This, however, is really good because of its better rate of fire. In fact, it's by really good, I mean it's much better than the FNAB and the M3 Grease Gun. It's still a pretty bad SMG and the 9th worst weapon in the game. Number 33. The Maz 36. The only thing that saved this from being any lower is the bayonet change. This thing actually has a bayonet and it's actually pretty decent. It also is decent at close range, so I guess I'm going to have to put it. It's still in the top 10 since bayonets can be equipped on Kar 98Ks. But hey, at least this thing is good in close range. However, it's still a pretty bad it's still a pretty bad rifle. I almost said SMG there for some reason. And it easily cracked the top 10 for worst. Let's just move on to the next weapon. Number 32. The M1 Carbine. The M1 is essentially... It's essentially a filler weapon, really. It's supposed to be this, you can fire it quick, and it's basically like a SMG, but you can use it. It's supposed to be a pseudo SMG you can use on your rifleman, so you can use this alongside a Garand, use the Garand for longer range. there's a few damning things about it, which I'll mention later when I'm talking about the grenade launcher variant. But the main thing is that the Garand just performs its job better, really. And that's the most damning thing, again. The Garand is just a mile better than this. And also, you pretty easily get the grenade launcher variant, which supersedes this completely. Let's move on to the next weapon. Number 31. The Springfield M1903. I'm using the A1 as an example here because you can't really show the Springfield, but really, the Springfield is the default starter weapon and it shows. It's really only above the lower categories because it's free, and it's essentially, you get what you paid for. But yeah, it's a decent bolt action, and it's better than the paid bolt actions, excluding, of course, the scoped ones and the number 4. And of course the ones with the grenade launchers, the grenade launcher, Kar98, whatever. On the premise that it's free, and you know it's a free rifle at the end of the day, so yeah, it comes in here, but it's not the last time we're going to be talking about a Springfield in this video. Number 30. The Springfield M1903A1. Yeah, I had to put this slightly higher. The A1 is just slightly better. The only real advantage is the scope, but it's an extra you have to pay for, but it's still a decent extra that you have to pay for. And unlike a couple other weapons I could mention, this at least feels like a legitimate, you're paying 1 silver order to add a scope on, so that it's not insanely overpriced. Let's move on to the next weapon. Number 29. The Kar98K. Another starting weapon. This one's, I think I just prefer the Kar over the Springfield, which is why it's getting the slight nod here. You can fit the bayonet on it like the Springfield. I don't think I mentioned it when I was talking about the Springfield. But yeah, really good, really solid weapon. And, there was a reason why it was the main rifle of the Wehrmacht. Like the Springfield, it's solid. You get what you paid for. But yeah, really solid weapon. Better than the alternative versions, which you unlock a little bit later as it's free. Number 28. The Kar98K with the scope. Exact same reason why I put the Springfield with a scope over the Springfield. Number 27. The Kar98K with the shooting cup. Okay, this one actually feels like a legitimate upgrade to the car. Now, obviously, I did put the rifle grenades a lot higher on the list as the worst weapon. But these, the grenades actually kind of feel like a justification for the cost. And they're not insanely expensive as well. Like, yeah, they're 2 silver orders. And I think these ones are actually better at killing infantry than the rifle grenade, the AT rifle grenades. So at least they can perform their job well, unlike the AT rifle grenades. Man, the AT rifle grenades were not good. Yeah, it comes, basically, again, it's another Kar98K once you remove the grenades. And other than that, I can't really put it any higher than the car. It's just slightly better because of those rifle grenades. Anyways, let's move on to the next weapon. Number 26. The Beretta M1918. This thing is the antithesis of a specialist weapon. It's really, if you're not kissing the enemy in the face with this thing, you're not going to get much use out of it. Unlike other really quick firing weapons with low magazines like the PPSH and the PPS-43, which can be used at mid-range, this thing can only really be used in short range. It's decent at mid-range, but it's not as good as other SMGs, especially SMGs that are unlocked earlier at mid-range fighting. Yeah, there's not really much to say. It's basically, you walk into a building, you do a quick burst, everything dies. Really, kind of like a Tommy gun in a way, but with quicker rate of fire, and a little bit less magazine. Anyways, let's move on to the next weapon. Number 25. The MP34. The MP34 really just comes here by default. Like, it's actually not a bad SMG. Like, the Axis get a pretty decent SMG off the bat. And this thing's not too bad, actually. It's pretty good. Solid. It holds its own well. It's just an average SMG. The only real downside is it's 9mm, but it's fine. I mean, it's a fine SMG, but unfortunately there are better SMGs later in the tech tree. Speaking of, number 24, the MP40. This feels like a crime putting this in the bottom half. The MP40 is fine. It's a good SMG, but it shows how good the other weapons are. That the MP40, one of the most iconic weapons in the war, one of the most iconic SMGs of the war, one of the most iconic weapons in all of video games. Everyone knows what an MP40 is, and it's only in the bottom half, and it kind of shows how good the other weapons are. This is a really good SMG. It's really solid. I really like it, and you can't go wrong with an MP40. Anyways, let's move on to number 23. We're actually getting up to the weapons I kind of like, actually. I'm starting to like some of these weapons. Number 23. The M1 carbine with the M8 grenade launcher. A pretty solid upgrade to the M1 carbine. Really just supersedes the carbine in every way. If you were still using the carbine when you get this, just throw those out and start using these now. They're basically the exact same weapon, only they have a grenade launcher, which is a lot of fun to use. I'm pretty sure one of my favourite clips I ever did when I was recording for this channel was shooting from the top floor of the chateau and hitting someone from about 70 metres away with one of these grenades and getting a double kill. I loved doing that, and it was one of my favourite moments I have ever recorded. Anyways, let's move on to number 22. Number 22. The ZK383. The problem with the 383 is that it's kind of lodged in between two much better weapons. It just doesn't feel like a good option when you have the MP35, which is unlocked much earlier, and then you have the Beretta M38, which is unlocked just a few levels later, and then a few levels later after that, you get the MP43. So I haven't really used this much. It's fun to use. It's still a pretty good weapon, but it's just lodged in the middle of so many much better weapons. Number 21. The number 4 rifle. Yeah, this is a really good bolt action. I mean, really, anything 303 is great for a start, but I think what makes the Lee Enfield so good is you have a increased magazine, and also it's just a really good rifle, actually. Like, it's one of the best bolt, if not the best bolt action in the game, and I will take that to the bank. And it's great, you know. The only real downside is you can't put a bayonet on the ones in Normandy, but you can put bayonets on the ones in Tunisia. So, hey, if you want to reenact World War One, you can go in Tunisia. They even have the number 3 variant over there. Number 20. The Sten Mark II. For everyone who hates the Sten and is confused about why it's in the top 20, just look at everything that came before it and give a justifiable reason as to why the Sten is worse than them. The only real thing is that there's a few other weapons that, you know, they could be better than the Sten, but I just love the Sten. I still use it to this day, even on my pilot for my P47. I still use the Sten with him. He literally will just jump out the plane and he'll just keep fighting with the Sten. Really strong weapon, 9mm. Obviously, it's a very strong weapon. Really, it's just a strong weapon. Does a lot of damage, and it's fun to use. To put it bluntly, this is the first real SMG that the Allies get in Normandy. And it's only at number 20. There's still a few more to go. Number 19. The Lancaster. Essentially take what I said about the Sten and just make it better. Like, it's generally just a better version of the Sten. The only real good upside over the Sten is it has much better sights than the Sten. It also has better recoil, better rate of fire, better everything really. Better damage as well, despite firing the same caliber. It's just a good, solid, well-rounded SMG. And it's only at level 19. This thing is probably is a really strong SMG, and it's only at number 19. Like, that just shows the quality of what's coming. That the Lancaster, which is one of the best weapons in the game, might I add, is at number 19. Number 18. The Scoped M1 Garand. It's an M1 Garand with a scope. Like, what's there not to say? It's a very strong... The M1 Garand is a very strong rifle as is. But adding a scope onto it just makes it it just makes it about as good. The only problem is that the scope is kind of a bit inaccurate. And, you know, which is why it's slightly worse than the regular M1 Garand. Anyways, and also the price is a little bit too expensive for just the scope increase. But it's not the worst thing in the world. It's still a pretty good M1 Garand, and I still like it. It's really good when you're sniping people from underneath a flak gun. Anyways, it comes in at number 17. Pretty good weapon, but it just gets uphill from here, really. Number 17. The Scoped G43. The Scoped G43 is really just the exact same as the Scoped Garand. The only real problem I have with this is that I don't really like the Z4, the ZF4 scopes, but it's still solid. Still a very solid weapon, which is the only reason why it's not... It's the same reason for the Garand with the scope. They're the only reasons why I haven't put them over the other variants. Unlike the Car 98K and the Springfield, where there's actually a legitimate advantage with the scope, these more come up with a disadvantage of putting the scope on them. But that being said, it's still a very solid weapon, and you can still take the scope off at least, so, hey, there's something with them. Anyways, let's move on to the next weapon. Number 16. The M1 Garand. This is very controversial, not having the Garand in the top 15. Like, the Garand is great. It's a great weapon. But, man, if you look at what comes after it, you'll understand why. It's a very strong weapon, but just missing the top 15. The only real downside, I think, is the 8-round magazine, which kind of hinders it, especially when compared to what's at number 15. Number 15. The G43. Yeah, the G43, it's basically the exact same as the Garand. It's slightly better, though. I prefer the magazine. It's got a better reload, in my opinion. Obviously, the Garand's reload is more iconic with the ping in the air, but I think it really just, you know, it makes you more of a target, which was actually a concern with the Garand. Whereas with the G43, it's not as much of a target when you're reloading. As well as that, I think it feels more powerful than the Garand. Also, the way it sounds, the way the G43 sounds in this game is incredible. Like, if you've never fired this thing, fire it, and you'll understand why. It feels powerful. When you fire it, the shots just bounce off everywhere, and it's great. It's honestly just a really cool sound, which is another reason why I put it over the Garand. Anyways, let's move on to number 14. Number 14. The M1 Garand with the grenade launcher. I know that I put the Axis equivalent way higher at the top. But there's a reason for this. One, it's the Garand, so it's already the weapon at number 16, just with a slightly higher cost. Two, the grenades, again, the same. It's got the same reason, but the grenades, like the Kar 98K's one, are good against the infantry. However, there's another main reason why I'm putting the Garand with the grenade launcher slightly higher than the G43 and the other Garands, and that is because there's no Garand unlock at level 17, which gives you the grenade launcher. Like, that's the main reason why I put the grenade launcher car so high up on the list, because this thing, there's no real alternative to this. With the Kar 98K, you have the shooting cup as well. But yeah, with this you have the M1 carbine, which again, the Garand's better than the carbine, so there's not really much you can say about it. Anyways, let's move on to Unlucky 13. Number 13. The Bren Mark II. We've not seen an LMG in a very long time. Well, who could blame you, since the LMG that I put as the second worst comes in as the 13th best weapon in the game. Like, that shows the quality between the Bren and the Breda. The only real downside with the Bren is the sights. The sights are awful on this thing. But other than that, it's actually it's a very good LMG, and it's one of the best. In my opinion, it's one of the best in the game, and it's a top 15 weapon in Normandy. It kind of shows how good the LMGs are in Normandy, that a weapon that I put as its worst, as one of the worst, is so high up. Like, I put this as number 5 out of 6 on my LMG video, and it's coming basically edging the top 10. It's edging the top 10. It's a very strong LMG, and it's one of my favourites. Anyways, let's go on to number 12. Number 12. The Browning M1918A1. Not really much to say about the A1 over the Bren. They're both insanely solid LMGs. This one's better at sieging, whereas the Bren is better at holding positions. So, yeah, it's good. They're both designed for something different, and they both excel at what they do. The only real problem is the magazine and the sight, which is, the sights are shared with the Bren. But hey, it's good at attacking a point. Anyways, let's move on to number 11. Number 11. The MG34. The first weapon on this list to get a 10 out of 10. And it's just missing out on the top 10. Like, that shows how good the top 10 is. That a 10 out of 10 weapon is missing the top 10. Yeah, this thing you can make a claim for the MG34 being in the top 10. And if we're being honest, it could get maybe number 10. Like, if you saw my LMG video, you'll know what I mean. But this thing is still incredibly solid. I like it. It's a very good LMG. It looks pretty good as well. But yeah, strong LMG. Really good rate of fire. Really good for defending. The only real downside I have is the sights, because of the rangefinder here, which is blocking a good portion of the sights. But other than that, it's still a very solid LMG. And just missing on the top 10. Literally apples and pears on the top 10 with what's coming in next. Number 10. The MG42. The Buzzsaw just edged the top 10 in my opinion. Again, like I said, this and the 34 is really just apple and pears. The only thing I prefer over it is the sights. Other than that, it's just basically the exact same LMG. Really, same feel. Slightly better recoil though with the 42 in my opinion, so has that as well. Yeah, the 42 is just great. I really love this thing, but I still use the 34. I still got maxed 34 on a few of my troops. This thing is still it's a good weapon. The MG34, same with the 42. Good 10 out of 10 weapon. Comes in at number 10. Number 9. The M2 Carbine. Just so strong. This thing is very strong. The fact that you can put a bayonet on this thing is amazing. Basically, this is the close range weapon for soldiers in the game. The only real problem is the sights. It's heavily zoomed in. The sights are really, you know, if they weren't so heavily zoomed in, this thing would be much better. It could easily be a top 5 weapon. But because of the highly zoomed in sights, along with the pretty violent recoil, I'm going to have to only put this in at number 9. Anyways, let's move on to number 8. Number 8, the M1 Thompson. You knew a Thompson was definitely getting into the top 10. What probably kind of shocking is the fact that I probably don't have this around the top 5. Now, the M1 Thompson is great. It has great sights. It's just a great weapon in general. I'm not a fan of its fire rate though, which is why it's just missing the top 5. And I just think there's just better weapons than the Thompson, than the M1 Thompson. Speaking of, number 7, the MP35. Without question, the most surprising weapon in the tech tree, the MP35 is just so good. Like, it doesn't look that good, but when you use it, you're like, holy shit, this is actually really good. It's great at pretty much any range. You throw this at close range, mid-range, long range. It's great. I love this thing. It's just a great SMG. It's great at basically everything. You throw it at any range, it's great. I love this thing. It's one of my favourites. Comes in very easily at number 7. Just missing the top 5 by the slimmest of margins. Number 6. The Beretta Model 38. Another really easy contender for the top 5. The reason it's just missing the top 5 is I think there's too much competition, and I think that the other weapons are just slightly stronger than it, which are ahead of it, are just slightly stronger than this thing. Really good rate of fire, really good magazine, and it looks great as well. It feels great to use. It's one of my all-time favourite weapons, and I love it. Anyways, let's move on to the top 5, which this thing just missed. Number 5, the FG42. I know it's the most boring weapon in the game, but yeah, it's overpowered. The only reason it's not at the top slots is because A, it's my opinion, and in my opinion there's 4 other weapons that are better than it, and also, it's boring. Everyone knows it's boring. Like, it's boring to talk about. I'm generally bored just talking about it. Let's move on to number 4. Number 4, the FG42-2. Oh look, another FG42. This one's masquerading as a sniper rifle. Yeah, not much to say about this. That hasn't already been said. The only good thing is it actually has a really cool reload where you basically snap the magazine, where they literally snap the magazine out and then slam another one in. I love that reload, but other than that, it's just the exact same thing. A pretty boring semi-auto, semi-full auto machine gun, basically. It's a machine gun. It's an LMG, and anyone who says otherwise, you're kidding yourself. Number 3, the Browning M1918A2. Wow, what a weapon. Like, generally, take everything that's great about the BARA-1 and reduce the magazine reload, fix the sight, and make it so that you can actually defend a point with it, and you've got the Browning and you've got the A2. The BARA-2 is just great. This is just an amazing weapon. I would say this is more powerful than the FG. Yes, I would say this thing is more powerful than the FG42. It's without question the best LMG in the game. Like, I generally have not had an LMG which I prefer to this yet. Like, there might be a few other LMGs that could compare to it when I unlock them, but At the moment, nothing comes close to this. What an LMG. Just so good. It comes in easily at number 3. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2, the MP43. The only true assault rifle in Normandy. This thing is just so good. You grind through... This thing is literally playing on easy mode. It's so good. Like, I've been talking about the prices of most things and how some weapons don't justify their 3 silver orders cost. Some do, some don't. This thing could be 5 silver orders, and I would say it would still justify that cost. This thing is just insanely good. If you don't have everyone equipped with these yet, or every assault equipped with these yet, what are you doing? Like, and you have these unlocked, what are you doing? This thing is just too good. It's too good. But there is it's just beaten by one thing. One final contender beat this weapon. Number 1, the M1A1 Thompson. You know, I go through a phase where I think I've gone through this phase a few times actually, where I go, maybe the M1A1 Thompson isn't the best weapon in Normandy, and I think maybe it's, you know, the MP43 is slightly better. And then I use the M1A1 Thompson again, and I realise, yeah, this thing is the best weapon in Normandy. The fact is, I haven't got a single fully upgraded Thompson yet, and I still think this way. I've got a couple fully upgraded MP43s, and I'm pretty sure all my MP43s are at least on 5 stars. With the Thompson, half my Thompson users don't even have an upgrade to it, and I still love it. It is just insanely good. It is probably the best weapon. I think it's one of my all-time favourite weapons in all of FPSs. The Enlisted M1A1 Thompson is incredible. There is, of course, the problem with the sights, but hey, that's a nitpick. How great this thing is. I love it. It is just great. And it looks great. It feels great. Man, I cannot wait for the drum mag version. Anyways, I'm going to end this video here. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.